Troubleshooting ACE is similar to troubleshooting any application in that you want to narrow down where the problem or what the problem is. First of all, you want to check for non-responsive calculations. Maybe the calculation exceeded the calculation limit time on each context. And the default on this is 10 minutes. And if you look at the ACE manager, if I drill down, I'll just pick a random calculation I have here. You'll notice that the calculation limit is 600. That's in seconds, and that is the calculation limit. That is the timeout value, if you will, for this calculation. And you can see I have no violations. You can change this by right-clicking on the specific context and edit calculation limit, and you can set a new number of seconds in that window as well. And when you're troubleshooting ACE, there's a couple things you want to start with. You want to verify that the service is started. A very common issue is the service may have been stopped or halted. If the ACE scheduler is running, then look at the ACE manager. See if you're running at the executable module and context level. And that's very easy to see with our color coding. You can see the green highlights next to everything that is running. If something has been turned off, it will be gray, and if it's in an error condition, it'll be red. And finally, if you're having trouble with any of the ACE components, check the security. Make sure you have the proper trusts and privilege set up to access both the module database and the tags. Like many other applications, ACE has a specific message logging algorithm, and you can enable or disable various levels. Now, each context has its own message log level. If I right-click and select message log level, you can see in this particular calculation I have counter information and calculation events checked. But by default, the only thing that's actually enabled with message logging are the errors. And you can see that is disabled, so you can't not log errors. The rest of it is optional, up to the user, and can be set again in ACE Manager. There are two things you can do in the wizard or in the code to give a little bit of help with messaging. You can add the log PI ACE message function to your code, where you can capture a message and then log it, write it out as a string. You can add that to your code, as well as improve your error handling. And this isn't necessarily an ACE thing, but it's always a good idea to use the on-error functions and go to and resume next commands to avoid interruptions in your code. You can remember a lot of Visual Basic issues that arise in ACE will result in a calc failed value for the output tag. So if you ever see calc failed, it indicates that there was a problem. And so making your code a little bit more responsive to errors will help you in troubleshooting at a later date. If you're curious or you want to keep an eye on the computation time of a given calculation, you can add that to the message logging, and you can see if I look under message logs on my Pi server and I requery for the last 2 minutes, I can see that I have one line here that says ACE context sends counter ID 101 with value 15. That counter ID 101, that is actually the time that it takes to perform the computation, or calculation time. And it's in milliseconds, so that particular calculation took 15 milliseconds. You can also see the corresponding trigger time as well. To enable these, you have to go into your ACE Manager and enable the counter information. And you do that again by going into the specific context, setting the message log level, and checking counter information. You can always use Task Manager to keep an eye on the memory that your applications are using, as well as the CPU time that they're using at the moment. If I go into my ACE Manager, I can see I have 3 executables running, my ACE calcs, PI ACE exe01, and test. And if I look under my Windows Task Manager and sort by name, I can find those applications. Here's my ACE calcs, PI ACE exe1, and if I scroll down far enough, I should be able to find test, and I can see what their memory usage is, and I've got right around 11, almost 12K, around 12,000K for each application. So you can keep an eye on which processes are using how much memory, and if that memory usage goes up over time. There are very few differences between ACE version 1 and ACE version 2. However, when you deal with system performance counters, ACE 2 definitely has an advantage. PI ACE version 2 adds a series of performance counters per module to your system. So you can use the PI Performance Creator or your SMT to build PI tags that will watch a lot of these metrics for you and historize the results. So for example, you can have calculation executable time, or a number of calculations that were executed or skipped or aborted calculations, calculations with errors and time to complete. You can measure all these things in PI Performance Monitor tags with version 2.0.